of our Thursday Coaches Corner, where Coach Dave Serrano and myself spend some time with college coaches from all around the country, all levels, all divisions, in hopes of sharing information with not only student athletes, but families as well. I want to encourage all of those that find their way, to our weekly discussions, whether it's through podcast or here through video. Go ahead and subscribe and hit that update button so that you're aware of not only who's going to be joining us in the future, but maybe even be able to go back and kind of find your way to some of the great conversations we've had over the last few months. So make sure you hit that subscription button, both to your podcast service as well as either YouTube or your video stream service. Today, we are joined by former major leaguer, somebody who is kind of in my era. I'm a dinosaur, having played in the 70s and early 80s with regard to high school and college. In a very experienced head coach, I believe 26th year at Princeton University, former major leaguer, UNC Tar Heel,
Correct.
Scott Bradley. So, Coach Bradley, thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. It's should be an enjoyable conversation.
Well, I know, when Dave and I have the ability to talk to coaches, we really like to take a deep dive into, not only the Ivy League, but what makes a school such as Princeton such a great environment as a potential student athlete. Maybe shed some light on Princeton University for those families and student athletes that would like to learn a little bit more about the university.
Well, I think the biggest thing is that at all the Ivy League schools, I'd like to think that it is really the true student athlete experience. Our athletes in all sports come to a place like Princeton to develop in every aspect of their life. They want to reach the top academically, and they also want to reach the top athletically. We have, I think, since I've been at Princeton, as you mentioned, this is my 26th year. We've had 8 players get to the major leagues. Currently, we have 3 major league general managers are our former players. The World Series this year, Chris Young, one of our former players, GM of the Texas Rangers, and Mike Hazen, GM of the Diamondbacks. Both took advantage of everything Princeton had to offer. We have NFL players right now. We have players in the NHL. We have Olympians. We just have the top of everything. So again, we try to tell the kids and the parents when they come through that they don't have to give up on any athletic dreams whatsoever in having the opportunity to get the best education in the world.
Hey, Coach, great to see you again. It's been a couple months since I've seen you out on the road.
That's right.
I've always, from afar, I think the closest place that I've been fortunate enough to coach at that has the academics is UC Irvine, and that's not even close to it in an Ivy League school. Kind of explain to the listeners that recruit out there, what are the challenges? Because there's so much respect from a coach like me, the challenges of being that elite academic student and then being an elite athlete. And that's a challenge. How do they handle that?
You know what? I think that they're so disciplined. At least most of them are when they get here. That time management is usually one of their strengths. Like every other school, we have our kids who will get in academic difficulties and everything else. And almost every time it's just that they don't manage their time very well. The Ivy League has some restrictions a little bit different from the rest of the NCAA in terms of the amount that we can practice, the amount that we can be on the field. So what it does for the coaches, we have to be a little flexible. We have to be a little creative. We have to make sure that we don't ever feel like we're wasting the players' time at all. Our guys know that at any point, if they have to leave practice early, if they have to come late because of things that are going on the academic side, they know that as a coaching staff, we'll be flexible to make sure that they get all their work in. We could have a player, we could start practice at 3:30 that day, and we have a player who might have a late lab, or even, may wake up in the morning and see that there's a guest lecturer on campus that they really want to see. And all they have to do is reach out to us and say, hey, coach, getting to practice at that time frame is going to be a little difficult. Do you guys have any open time during the day when I can come get some swings or some ground balls or have a bullpen? And the answer is always yes. We had somebody joke at one point. They heard a rumor that all our practices at Princeton were optional. And I kind of laughed and I said, no. Our practices are not optional. But the time of those practice, we're flexible. We want our student athletes to be able to take advantage of absolutely everything that goes on at Princeton University. We're fortunate to be in a sport like baseball where, I don't need during the week, the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday practices when we battle, classes and labs and everything. We try to do most of our skill instruction. We try to do most of our skill work. And then Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays is when we really try to incorporate more of our team stuff when we know we're not fighting with classes, we're not fighting with labs. But during the week, we're going to try to see how many ground balls we can get you. We're going to try to see how many swings we can get you with instruction. We'll set up bullpen times to work in and around classes. So we try to be really productive as a staff, especially with the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Mondays are always off days for us. But the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, and then classes are not quite as prevalent on Fridays. Most of our guys are done by noon on Fridays if they have class. So that's when we can really focus on all the team type fundamentals.
Coach, one of the first questions that I would like to kind of ask and kind of get your feedback on, it seems as if the world collectively, not the Ivies and specifically not Princeton, but the college baseball process is becoming less about development and more about we got to win now. Let's plug and play players and things like that. Now that doesn't really fit with the Ivy League model. Would you say the Ivy League as a whole and Princeton is more about the development as a whole with regard to the student athlete, not only baseball skill set, but with regard to things like time management, as you alluded to, and there's more development at a steadier pace that may take place at an Ivy League that may bear more fruit by the time they're juniors and seniors in college?
Walter, 100%. And that's a great point. Admission slots at the Ivy League schools are just so valuable. We don't get a lot of players. We're getting 6 or 7 support slots a year, with the admissions, and when I say support slots, it's not a guarantee. They still have to be Princeton caliber students. They have to go through the process like everybody else. But when we support those applications are taken apart from the other 40,000 and they are reviewed independently by our admissions staff. And as long as our admissions staff feels comfortable that they will have success and that they've earned the right to come to Princeton, they will admit them without comparing them to the other, 40,000 people. So when you're on our recruiting list, it's a huge separator, for those student athletes. And we can't replace them. If they struggle or whatever, it's not like the next year they're going to say, okay, well, you lost a player, we're going to give you 9 this year. So when we bring those players in, it's all about development. It's about personal development. It's about making sure that they can handle the academics. It's about making sure that they know when to get things done. Some of the freshmen walk in and can kind of handle that a little bit better than some of the others. But when we recruit our players, I'm almost looking at them. And sure, of course, every once in a while, freshmen jump in and contribute for us. But emotionally, mentally, everything else, when we recruit players, we're hoping that they're going to really be able to compete for playing time when they're sophomores. That's when we feel like they should be ready from a maturity level to really compete and to develop. And if you look at all the Ivy League teams' schedules, we play all the big boys.
Oh yeah.
We go play all the big boys. So when we're recruiting, we want the players that maybe Stanford wants, but maybe isn't going to offer money to. We want those guys that maybe physically aren't quite at the level of being at Vanderbilt or Stanford or one of those premier, academic / baseball powers. And then we hope to develop them. And by the time they are sophomores and juniors, they could go play anywhere. We had a 7th round draft pick this year in Scott Bandura with the Giants. Harvard had 2 pitchers drafted in the first 7 rounds, I think. So the talent at the Ivy League level, we go play teams, and teams are, if they don't know about us, are really surprised with the talent that we throw out at them.
Coach, that's a great point. That kind of led to my next question, as Walter asked a great question, is, do you feel, I'm transplanted from the West Coast, okay? I live in the South now. Do you feel that the Ivy League is disrespected to some sorts because of the challenges you guys have? It seems like, you've brought up many names, high draft picks, guys that have been GMs, a lot of good players have come out of the Ivy. They've had a lot of challenges. Do you feel that because you're the Ivy League and you're an academic institution, that there's a little bit of disrespect around the country to how good a baseball there is out there on the East Coast?
If you had asked me that question 7 or 8 years ago, I would have said 100% yes. I would have agreed with you. But I think that what's happened over the last 5-6 years, all the Ivy Leagues, we have some great, really talented young coaches in the league right now. When I first got into the league 25 years ago, most of the Ivy League teams were, scheduling other Northern League teams down south. They weren't playing competitive schedules. And when I came into Princeton, I want to show my kids what really elite, high-level, high-powered college baseball is. So we jumped right in the beginning, and our early schedule from the day I got here is ACC, SEC, Big 12 programs. I mean, we've played Oklahoma State, we've played Arkansas, we've played LSU multiple times, we've played South Carolina multiple times. So I think it has really helped to raise more. And if you look at the Ivy League schedules, everybody does it now. And we have success. We went down early in the year. We're able to win a game from Georgia last year. We're able to win a game from Duke. I think Penn went away and took 2 out of 3 from Texas A&M, if I'm not mistaken, last year. So we're going out. Everybody's doing the same thing now. And the winner of the Ivy League, when they go to the regionals, people know that they're going to have a battle on their hands. We may not have the depth that the Power 5 schools have. We may not have the pitching depth, but when we can run our front 4 or 5 arms out there, and with our position players, we can play against anybody. And I think people are finally, Dave, starting to understand that. And we don't get that disrespect anymore. It used to be, you used to hear people say all the time, you'd be out on the recruiting trails and you'd be mixed in and around with some of the Power 5 schools. And there'd be a nice, solid little, player out there. And you would hear one of the other coaches say, oh, he'd be a nice Ivy League player. Right. And you'd sit there, what are you talking about? A nice Ivy League player. We've shown up at places, and from a physicality standpoint, sometimes people are looking and they would think we're the team in the SEC. I always love to tell the story that we went down and played Old Dominion, a 3-game series early in probably after 5 or 6 years of my career. So we went down to play Coach Guzzo, and we faced Ollendorf, or we faced Verlander, and I had Ross Ollendorf pitching for us. There must have been 200 scouts at the game. We actually gave Verlander a beating. We scored 10 runs off of him in the first 5 innings. We swept Old Dominion that year. Both of their 2 and 3 starters were also draft picks. And Coach Guzzo, if you guys know him, is just a gem. I mean, he's just one of the great old baseball guys. And every time I seen him, he comes up to me and says, Scott, he said, I tell people all the time, they always ask me, what was the best college team you ever played against? And he goes, and they think I'm going to give them some SEC or ACC team. And I always tell them that Princeton came down and ambushed us one year with a bunch of big league players. And he was right. Off of the roster that I brought down there, we had 5 players who got to the big leagues off that team. Off of one Ivy League baseball team, which was, pretty impressive. They weren't all at the same point in their career, but at the end of that season, we had 5 players drafted in the first 20 rounds. So again, I think that stereotypical Ivy League mentality, and it's in all sports. Look what our men's and women's basketball teams are doing this year. Both of them are going to be ranked in the top 25 at the end of the week. So I think finally we've that's been dispelled, that thought process.
Well, Scott, I think one of the recent rule changes has really helped with that regard, with regard to the recruiting period kind of being bumped up into the rising junior fall, August 1st. And it kind of allows everybody to take a deep breath, let athletes develop and see how they develop, going into that junior and senior year, which used to be kind of the Ivy League way of doing recruiting. And you and I had a great discussion pertaining to the postgraduate experience and how it's been around for decades in other sports, particularly hockey. Can you kind of talk about the postgraduate as far as college recruiting is concerned? Because a lot of families do not have a good, thorough understanding of the benefit of a true academic postgraduate experience.
Well, on your first point, I agree. Until I can see what courses somebody's going to take as a junior, how many AP courses they're going to take, maybe see one round of, the PSATs or the SATs. It doesn't do me a whole lot of good to, encourage somebody, back in the day when you could talk to the young players, because, what are we going to do? I can't get somebody until we see what their grades are like and what their junior year is looking like. There was no sense. So we had to wait a little bit, like you said. The other thing too is, this whole post-grad thing in other sports, we've had a number of post-grad players, kids that maybe don't quite develop, make a decision. And in the Northeast, there's so many great prep schools that offer post-grad, programs. And you get situations, and I'll use an example right now of one of my current players. So Tom Chmielewski is one of my, my best pitcher, was the first team all Ivy League last year. We all had a chance to see him. He went to Needham High School, up in Mass. We all saw him. He was, lefty, 83, 84, maybe touching 85 once in a while. All the Ivies kind of passed on him at that point. He was admitted to some of the really top tier academic, Division III schools.
Yep.
And he called us all up and he said, you know what, those offers will be there for me next year if I don't develop, but I'm going to bet on myself. My parents have said that I can go to Exeter to do a post-grad year, at Exeter. And over the course of that year, he grew. We all saw him so we basically started the recruiting process over again that next summer. He bumped up and was 85 to 87. And COVID hit during up at Exeter. So he didn't even get to play for Exeter that year, but it was just a year of maturity. It was a year of growth. It was a year of, just growing up. So we all saw him 85, 87. Everybody in the Ivy League, of course, was interested at that point. We were able to get him. That growth has continued. He's touching 94. He was one of the better pitchers up in the Cape. Turned down a fairly significant amount of money in the draft last year because he wanted to come back and finish his last year, at Princeton. And he'll have some options at the end of this year, either to do the draft or he's committed to the University of North Carolina, to do his COVID year, if that's the case as a grad student. And Tommy's a great example. I can't give names at this point, but two of my current recruiting class are doing post-grad years as we speak. It's a great opportunity we always try to tell the guys, if you don't just settle on a college situation, don't settle on, you think there's more in the tank, the post-grad is a great opportunity to put yourself through the recruiting process a year later. It's expensive. A lot of the post-grad schools do have some scholarship money available. So the families have to, be able to handle the financial burden of it all. If they can't, and we've had it before, we've had a couple of situations where we kind of saw kids late in the process. The family didn't have the money to do a post. They just did straight up gap years. So they just did straight up gap years where they didn't make a commitment. They didn't decide to go to school after their senior year. They worked, they took internships, and then reapplied then that following fall, and then started their college career. But the idea of settling and starting your college clock to me just doesn't make sense. You want to make sure that in your heart and soul, you're really excited about where you're going to go to college.
Before I ask this next one, I think social media has played a big part in settling.
Huge.
Everyone's excited about getting that announcement out there. When Coach Bradley goes out to evaluate a player, so you already know academically he lines up with Princeton. What are you looking for? What are the attributes you're looking for? I know it's a broad question, but from a position player standpoint and then to a pitcher standpoint.
This may be simplistic, but I'm 63 years old, so I'm on the older side of things. I want to see a baseball player, right? I'm really overly not concerned about the metrics. I'm going to look at the numbers. I'm going to dive into them later on. I want to see somebody who carries himself like a baseball player. Somebody who acts the right way, somebody who interacts with their teammates the right way. And in my mind, there's a certain way a baseball player is supposed to look. I want to see, for a position player, I want to see an efficient swing. I want to see somebody who's just not, overpowering, somebody who doesn't look like they've had 9,000 hitting lessons in their life. I want to see some athleticism. I want to see somebody who looks like they could play another sport. I want to see how much bat speed they can generate without much effort. Defensively, especially in the infield, I want to see somebody who moves efficiently, somebody who has a good clock. You can see they have an internal clock, not somebody who fields a ground ball, takes 6 crow hops because they know there's a radar gun on the other end to see what their arm speed is across the diamond. I want to see infielders throw off the run. I want to see them throw from different arm angles. Outfielders, I want to see a really nice, smooth, athletic gait. You can tell when somebody tracks after a fly ball that they got it. It's not, there's a lot of effort. I just want to see somebody who can play the game that looks easy to me, right? That was always the thing. You watch the great players and there was just a way about them, the way they carried their glove. From a pitching standpoint, it's the same way. I want to see somebody. Of course, the pitching is easier because with all the data, to me, the data is easier to interpret. But I want to see somebody who's not finished yet. I want to see somebody who has a nice frame, somebody whose arm is nice and easy, somebody whose arm is efficient, somebody who can make the ball jump out of their hand. Somebody who can throw strikes, somebody that can hold runners on. That's the biggest thing. Somebody who can field their position. There's so much velocity, Dave. You and I are at a lot of different events. There's so much velocity out there these days. And for the hitters, we all train for velocity now. So the number of guys throwing 93, 94, 95 that have a hard time getting people out right now, it's incredible. So when I go watch, you see me, I don't take 9 million notes. I just watch, and I should be able to remember who I like, who's doing something to catch my attention. My very first recruiting event ever, I fell in love with this kid watching him run to and from his position. This was 25, 26 years ago. I kind of just watched him. He just caught my eye all the time. Ran to his position, ran off the field, the way he held the glove in his hand. He was a center fielder and everything else. I kind of looked at his information. I saw he was only a freshman. So I kind of tracked and everything else. And I didn't take a note on this kid. I didn't do anything. It was Sam Fold.
Oh.
So it was Sam Fold. I'm just watching him up at the top 96 of the Lightning event up in Lynn, Massachusetts.
Amen. Hometown.
The very first event I went to. And he caught my attention just by the way he ran on and off to his position.
Coach, I realize the information you just gave over the last 2 minutes, how valuable that is.
My
Anyone listening to this, any recruit, any parent, I don't think that's old school. That's the right school, what you just talked about.
Amen.
You know, I
Amen.
try to explain sometimes that I may see a guy swing and sky a ball in the middle of the infield. And to me, it takes such a good, easy bat speed. And to me, it means way more than somebody fighting the ball off and, you know, hitting a blooper into right field. That's a base hit. I see that kid and I get excited about that kid who just missed one and skied one up into the infield. So when we go to events, the last thing that we really care about are results. Dave, you were probably the same thing. When we go watch middle infielders, I want to see a middle infielder make an error, and I want to see how comfortable he looks fielding the next ball hit to him. I want to see whether there's any thought about the ball that he just missed. Right?
Well, God, I'm going to tell you this, and I've said this to many coaches, young coaches. One of the biggest things I bear down on the infield is the slow roller, because that's everything about transfer and footwork in one little play right there. Who's stiff and who's athletic to move around on the infield?
No doubt. No doubt. And I try to tell kids when they put together videos, you know, that they send out to coaches, don't make it a robotic video. Don't worry about mechanics. Don't worry about it. You know, catch a ball in the hole and throw off your back foot. Don't, you know, take 6 steps to be cautious. Cautious. Hey, if I see somebody and he's cautious at an event, pretty good chance he's going to be that caution is going to turn into nerves when the game starts. Show me somebody who is free and loose and not afraid to, like you said, throw off the run, throw from different arm angles. An outfielder. If I see an outfielder catching with 2 hands, to me, there's some apprehension there, especially when they're off the run. You see an outfielder who's off the run and he's got to, you know, reach up and he just kind of reaches up casually with one hand and catches it. To me, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
You know, Coach, this is kind of my last question, but I really feel it's important. I really want to get this out there. And I want to talk about the word competitive. And you kind of just nailed it there with the cautious, the yellow, what I call the yellow flag versus the green flag. And I know you as an athlete were very versatile. And whatever it took to get between the lines, I can catch, I can play third, I can play outfield. And today, we seem to have a lot of specialization. I'm a shortstop. I'm a middle infielder. And I always ask parents, do you know who Jorge Posada was? Do you know he was a shortstop, second baseman at South Alabama? Can you just talk about being a competitor, but also being versatile as an athlete with regard to baseball? I think it's a lost art. We're trying to pigeonhole kids at such an early age, but it really hinders their development as they get older. Would you agree with that?
You know what? I same thing as I'd mentioned before. I really would agree with that statement 3 years ago. I think that even at the big league level right now, you're seeing the value of versatility, and you're seeing guys like Javi Baez when he first got to the big leagues playing all over the place. You're seeing Chris Bryant playing left field, playing first base, playing third base. You know, Cody Bellinger's running from first base to the outfield. So I think it's becoming more cool, right? In today's lingo, I think it's becoming a cool thing to be able to play multiple positions. And we tell kids all the time on the recruiting trails, right? If you're just a shortstop and you want to come to Princeton and I have a shortstop, well, hey, unless you're willing to move around the diamond and figure out how to get on the field, I have no need for you. The best team that we ever had at Princeton, from a position player standpoint, I had 7 high school shortstops in my starting lineup. You know what? Because, you know, Dave will tell you the number of high school shortstops that you see that you know can't play shortstop in college, it's the majority of them.
Right.
Most of the time when we watch high school shortstops, we're trying to say, okay, well, where will it? And we like the way they swing the bat. We're trying to say, okay, where will we move them to? You know, are they going to move over to second? Are they going to go to the outfield? You know, versatility is so important right now. And because it's becoming cool at the major league level, I think you see more parents now willing to accept the fact that if a youth league coach, a high school coach, suggests to the parents that, hey, I know he's a shortstop, but I want to get him some innings in the outfield. I think people aren't arguing that fact as much, that concept anymore, because they're seeing it done at the major league level and they realize it might be a way for them to get on the field that much sooner.
Great stuff, Coach. It didn't surprise me. And Walter shared that we were going to have you on. I knew you'd bring some valuable information to the table. And as always, it's great to see you. There's no secret of this, why you've had success at Princeton, and I wish you all the best this year, and be anxious to see you again next summer on the trail.
I appreciate it. If I can just add, Dave and Walter, one last thing too, that really, I think in the college baseball world, that is really helping us in the Ivy League. You can't imagine how many really high-level players right now are more interested in the Ivy Leagues than ever because of the transfer portal and transfer situations. The number of kids, now we don't bring transfers in. The only time we deal with the transfer portal on the way out is if there's an injury, because in the Ivy League, there's no red shirting. So all our seniors right now have COVID years. So you're seeing Ivy League players go to Power 5 schools. All of us have. I mean, I have 4 seniors right now. They're all going to Power 5 schools next year as grad students. And the number of really elite high school players that are coming to us now saying, I'm really interested in the Ivy League. One of my friends went to a Power 5 school. He thought he was going to play right away, and he sat for 2 years because they kept bringing in more transfers all the time. You know, this whole thing, you know, a lot of times kids are committing to schools. They think they know what other recruits in their class are going there, and then those schools bring in 4 or 5 transfers. And these kids find themselves in situations where there's either no playing time, and in some situations, there's no roster spots available. So the transfer portal, it'll be interesting to see what the NCAA decides to do in the next couple of years, because clearly they don't have it right now. The number of student athletes that are in the transfer portal and how much of that is tied to NIL money. You know, you see big time players transferring all over the place. And in the Ivy Leagues, we're not dealing with that. So it's amazing how that has made us even that much more. So many of the top prospects are looking at us more than ever right now because they don't want to be involved in those type of situations where they all of a sudden find themselves sitting behind transfers that at Power 5 schools.
Great point.
Tremendous point. And again, at the end of the day, all athletes and parents, you should be looking to trade athletic ability for academic excellence. And it would be hard to argue that there's any higher opportunity, both academically and athletically, than the Ivy Leagues. And Scott, I want to thank you very much for spending some time. It was a pleasure to get to speak with you. I look forward to our paths crossing, whether it's at summer events or at the ABCA. But such a great amount of information and valuable insight that you offered to parents and student athletes alike. And I'm extremely grateful, and have a great holiday season. And best of luck next year during the Ivy League season.
My pleasure, guys. And I enjoyed it. And same to you guys. Enjoy the holidays, and opening day and first day of practice is right around the corner.
Amen. And next week, Coach Serrano and myself will have Jose Cruz Jr. from Rice University, head coach, former big leaguer. We're kind of a theme here, former big league players that are now college coaches. But enjoy your week in preparation for your upcoming baseball season, and we'll see you everybody next week.